Hello everybody. So today I want to talk about CleanSpark really briefly. Don't have a lot of time, busy day for me, but CleanSpark, I listened to the call yesterday. The call was great. We get a lot of good news on CleanSpark. Their earnings were in line, and I'm not going to go through the numbers. I'm just going to analyze the big picture because really CleanSpark for me is a long-term hold. I know a lot of people are planning to sell CleanSpark and think they can nail the top of the Bitcoin market. But as someone who has been in Bitcoin for a while, I know you can never ever nail it. You can never ever get the top right. And so this is a company that I think is shaping up to be a great long-term hold, at least for me. The performance really has been second to none of this stock. If you look at the past 6 months, that has to be one of the best performance stock that you can find out of the past 6 months. It's just unheard of, this type of performance. To think this company was trading at $2 to $3, and I was lucky to get a few shares at these levels, although most of my shares have been bought higher, unfortunately. To think it was so cheap and now it's there, and where is it headed? Well, it can be headed quite high because when you mine Bitcoin, right, that's an exponential endeavor. That's an endeavor where you buy machines that have semiconductors that get ever better. And you are turning the exponentiality of how many transistors, how much hash you can put on a piece of silicon. You're turning that exponentiality into an analog world, right? Into the laws of thermodynamics, where you actually go mine and you mine this digital asset. I find that fascinating, knowing that Bitcoin miners, but CleanSpark is the main one I follow. Granted, I also own just a tad of Riot's. Never quite really understandable. CleanSpark is the number one I follow. One thing to important is that these companies are very interesting in the sense that they don't have to sell. Right? They don't have to sell anything, right? They just mine, and it's just the algorithm who every 10 minutes grants them a micro share payment with the mining pool, right? So they don't have to sell anything, and therefore they can become very mean machines where you can just focus on a ruthless efficiency, really focusing on taking advantage of that computing power, of that declining cost curve in computing power, as well as the upsize in the Bitcoin price. So quickly, the stock is down, after a great earnings. Well, this is the kind of stock, I don't know how many people actually go and listen to the call and think long term with these assets. My guess is fewer, or my guess is the whales don't do that, right? Only the small holders are actually going to have an edge by listening to the call. If you look at the performance of the stock today, it's down, of course, because Bitcoin is down. Because what? Well, I'm guessing it's always the same thing. The market makers try to get the stock towards the 60 grand because a lot of people get liquidated if they get to 60 grand. So they do these kind of fake sell orders that they put into the machines, and that's kind of how you can manipulate the market. It's a thing. It's always been a thing. Maybe it's always going to be a thing. I mean, unless we get to an asset in Bitcoin that's going to be in the trillions of dollars, where it's going to be harder to do that. Right now, you can still do that on that, and that's what they do. They try to get it to hit like 59.8, and if it's 59.8, that means that a lot of people get liquidated, and then they buy the Bitcoin on the back end. That's a game that's been played for a while in the Bitcoin space, but you can see really the multiplier is 3 to 4x. Really, I can't really tell if it's 3 or 4x. It's 3 to 4x because the stock was up 4%. Now it's down almost 5%, so you can get it in the high $15. Like I said in the thumbnail, in my view, this is an early bird price, and I actually just bought a little bit of CleanSpark before making this video. This is an early bird price. If you believe in Bitcoin miners, in my view, are very compelling, and I'm a big believer in Bitcoin, of course. I don't own any bonds. What I should have in bonds for a person my age, I have it in Bitcoin. So obviously, I'm a big believer in this new form of money. I don't believe in fiat. That is why the channel is named Beat the Denominator, because I don't believe in fiat. And I got this comment the other day on the channel telling me I don't understand how you can cover undervalued stocks and you can also cover Bitcoin. Well, the whole idea for that is that how do you beat the denominator, right? You can beat the denominator by having companies that are hyper growth, that grow super fast, that getting ever more of that dollar cash flow, that fiat cash flow that is melting. That's one way to beat the denominator. Another way to beat the denominator is to simply buy an asset, buy a hard asset, a form of money that is not a derivative of the US dollar, right? Stocks are derivative of the US dollar, so you better buy a really, really good derivative of that US dollar, one that takes in 30-40% more income, more revenue, 30 to 40% more revenue year after year. That's one way you beat it. Anyways, back to CleanSpark. Sorry about the tangent here. So what hasn't changed for CleanSpark? Well, everything. I mean, this is a steady Eddie Q2. We got some good news on new facilities, but this is a steady Eddie Q2. They're executing as good as ever. They're the number one in terms of execution, I think, out of all of the Bitcoin miners. One thing that upsets me with all of these Bitcoin miners is that you see a lot of Bitcoin miners just sell. They sell to finance their operations, and we'll see why it's the wrong way to do it in a sec. And the CEO really got into that. It's the wrong way to do it. Selling Bitcoin to finance your operations is not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to use equity to finance your operations. That's what CleanSpark's doing. So CleanSpark, their target is maintained sometime in 2025. We don't really know when, right? A lot of this depends on the utility companies, how fast they can get the power. This is megawatts we're speaking about. 45 megawatts here, 70 megawatts there. That's special permits, special transformers. It's complicated, right? And so it moves at the pace of analog to get this power, which I think is also going to be one of the greater piece of valuation of those miners going forward. Is they're going to have these data centers set up with a lot of power set up, and does that mean that they're going to be outbid by AI? And is AI going to go see those miners who own these facilities and maybe outbid them for these facilities? Because that is the war right now. Everybody's trying to get data centers. Anyways, they currently have 17 exahash, and they're on path to grow this to 50 sometime in 2025. So now keep in mind, Bitmain is manufacturing these new miners, and they're shipping miners to them, and the business consists mostly of spending time removing the old miners, selling them off, and putting in the new miners, knowing that miners retain some value, right? In the case of CleanSpark, they pay 4.4 cents per watt, and of course some miners are not profitable at 4.4 cents per watt, but we just saw the other day Argentina is going to be mining Bitcoin, and their cost of electricity over there can be less than 1 cent per watt. So you can even look at a miner maybe from 2016, 2017, still be profitable if you're paying 1 cent, 1 penny per watt. And of course, if it's free, if electricity is free, which many nation states have free electricity, if electricity is free, then even the oldest miner makes sense. So these miners retain some value, although they depreciate really quickly. Kind of like flat screen TVs, computers. We're used to that in the digital space. They're opening new sites. So they have Wyoming coming. Wyoming is 4 exahash that they're going to open. 2 facilities. One of them used to be already used to mining Bitcoin, but they bought the facility without the rigs, and they're going to put their own rigs in there. And another one is a new build. And these are 2 facilities in Wyoming. They chose Wyoming for 2 reasons. First of all, Senator Cynthia Lummis, she's very pro-Bitcoin, and therefore they want to go in the jurisdiction that are very pro-Bitcoin. That's why, for example, they're in Georgia. That's another reason, right? They want to go to jurisdictions that are very pro-Bitcoin, and all these Bitcoin mining companies are trying to get out of New York State, right? New York State had a lot of cheap hydro, a lot of cheap coal, but they're trying to get out of those states and go into the states that are pro-crypto. Understandable. Nobody wants to be operating in a state that doesn't want you. So that's one of the things that they do. Another point that they mention, and this is important for the efficiency, is they're pretty excited about Wyoming in the winter, right? Because these facilities will require less cooling in the winter months. In the case of CleanSpark, and so efficiently speaking, it can be a very good thing to operate in cold areas. And Wyoming is cold. I've been there. It is cold. So, anyways, they're replacing another way they make money. and they are becoming more efficient is they're replacing the S21s by S21 Pros, and they have gotten a really good option. I'll get to that option really quick on how cheap those miners are. So they do their calculation and they're reselling the S21 Pros to others and putting new miners, and that will increase the exahash by 3.4 exahash. So Wyoming increases exahash by 4. New S21 Pros increases exahash by 3.4. So if you add both, that means that perhaps in Q3, and maybe depending on the permitting process in Wyoming, maybe beginning of Q4, late Q3, perhaps I think in Q3 they could be at 24 to 25 exahash, right? At least 24.4 is when I add it up. So they're on pace, right? They're on pace to grow very fast. Keep in mind that 17 exahash, it's up 150% from 1 year ago. So this is a company that's growing very fast. It's hash. One of the things that I think most buyers didn't see is that they entered a contract with Bitmain at the depth of the bear market. And so they were astute buyers of modern mining machines, of next-gen mining machines. They were astute buyers because they paid $28 per hash, and you can look it up and do the calculation. It's very expensive, I'll give you a hint. And right now, the current price is around 50 per hash. Now, keep in mind, there is an aspect to the investments in miner that one needs to understand, is that these machines, the cost of machines is highly dependent on the cost of Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin was $100,000, the cost per hash would not be 50 anymore. The cost per hash would be more than 50. And so entering an option to buy actual machine is kind of taking an option on the price of Bitcoin. That equipment goes up in value as the price of Bitcoin goes up in value. Other miners are struggling right now because the reward was cut in half, and they've been approached to acquire other companies. They've done private deals so far. They like privates, they like publics, they want to do publics, but if they do a public company acquisition, they said it would be an acquisition and not a merger. And within that context, and also earlier in the call, CEO mentioned they're all about using equity for growth, which is, if you follow MicroStrategy, you know it's what MicroStrategy does. They issue equity, they issue debt. In the case of CleanSpark, we'll see they can do that at some point, right? But they issue equity to buy the Bitcoin. Well, in the case of CleanSpark, is they issue equity to buy mining equipment, to mine Bitcoin, to hodl Bitcoin. So they mine the mint Bitcoin for cheap, and then they hodl it. That is their edge, knowing that they've increased their Bitcoin stacking to 5,021 Bitcoins from 3,773 in Q1. So from February to now May, they've increased by about 1,500 Bitcoins they're holding, and so they have a full holding, or hodling as they say in Bitcoin. They have a full holding strategy. They mine it for cheap, they hodl it, and the equity is what they use to finance the operation. So their cash position right now is what they use to finance the operations, and we'll see if they issue equity. Obviously, the channel being named beat the denominator. I would much rather see them issue debt, and debt against the Bitcoin as collateral. But as we see, there was a recent governmental directive in the US against that. I don't know how that impacts it. My guess is that if they borrow it on chain, I think the future is going to be you're going to use Bitcoin on chain as a collateral to borrow stablecoin, and then maybe you can buy your S21s or S22s, S23s by then. Maybe you can buy them with stable coins or anything like that. So we'll see. Okay. I don't want to go over this again. I really do, but I don't have time. So many things to do today, but I really wish I could go over this again, but I don't have time. Therefore, I'll just redirect you to my video, Is CleanSpark Overvalued Best Bitcoin Miner? You can look it up in my channel. So this video, I went over this calculation, what's the valuation of CleanSpark really. So in 2025, I calculated that they would mine about, and I took into account the difficulty increases, right? Difficulty increases, their hash rate increases too, but the difficulty increases such that you mine less Bitcoin, and you obviously have the halving, which I took into account. So the cost to mine right? After the halving, right now, their cost to mine a Bitcoin is 28,000. So you can understand how profitable they are. And I'm assuming that cost to mine the Bitcoin, they're going to be covering by future transaction fees. We saw that happen, by the way, that the transaction fees went up, and they're going to finance that by the cash on the balance sheet. For the sake of simplicity, I assume that, and let me add there, plus equity issuance, right? They're going to use equity issuance too, and maybe debt. I hope debt. But anyways, the point is, so this stock, right, right now, if you mine 8,600 at 62,000, the stock would be trading at 6 times, right? At 6 times the mining proceeds. But if you see that you mine 248 K Bitcoin, so let's assume this bull run Bitcoin goes to 250K, right? That would be 2.1 billion, and then you would have a stock trading at an enterprise value of about 3 billion, so you would be at 1.5. So that would be too cheap. So my point is, right, the multiple that you can use for a Bitcoin miner is what's the price of the miner, what's the enterprise value of the miner, right, of the mining company, compared to how many Bitcoins they mine in a year, right? What's that price? Well, right, the PE, the price to earnings ratio in the S&P 500 is what? 18, 17, something like that. And it's a lot of very legacy companies. It's a lot of companies that don't beat the denominator in the S&P 500. The Nasdaq, companies that, in my view, beat the denominator, you get PEs in the 25, 26, right? I think a Bitcoin miner could reasonably expect a PE of at least, should we grant CleanSpark at least the PE of a GM? Like 6x is GM, right? 6x is General Motors. That's their PE. The PE should be much higher. Like if you ask me, the PE of a CleanSpark should probably be a 20, right? And so then you do your calculation, right? If the Bitcoin price of Bitcoin is this high and the PE is this high, you realize that'd be 1.5x if the enterprise value was 3. Well, actually, I'm getting more to 60 billion. If there was a price to earnings ratio of 20. So this is a company, in my view, that is heavily undervalued. I realize these numbers are very hard to understand. They're not hard to understand when you compute them. They're hard to believe, right? They're hard to believe, and it's very tough to not think that someone is delusional when you look at these numbers. But then again, try to do the numbers for Tesla. Try to do the numbers for NVIDIA. Whenever I look at NVIDIA, I find NVIDIA undervalued. And I can't believe it myself. This is the era we live in. We live in very exponential eras. And we are lucky in that finance is using analog lens, 1990s MBA lens, to analyze these new assets. And so, yeah, anyways. Should it be trading this low? I don't think so. Go see if you're interested in this, you can go see my video right there. This was no investment advice. This is just entertainment, no financial advice. I hope you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe. It takes me a while to do these videos. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.